Welcome back to another income report for February and January too in 2025. There's been a big shift for me in terms of royalties this year. So in this video, I will talk a bit more about that and also share the royalties that I generated from self-publishing low and medium content books on Amazon KDP. So just as a background, I did start KDP in 2019. So it was a very different landscape back then, but I do feel that there are still opportunities and there will always be opportunities as long as KDP exists. And Amazon loves new books and new products, so you generally get a boost in the algorithm when you publish something new, and that gives you a window of opportunity to make sales. So personally, I have been ramping up producing books again, and hopefully that's going to have a good impact overall. February and January royalties were considerably lower than the previous year, and interestingly, February was actually slightly higher than in January, which is unusual for me. January is usually one of my highest months, and this year it was several $1,000s less than last year. So let me know how it's been going for you in general in the comments. I know that some people mentioned before that they had noticed a decline in their sales. As far as publishing so far this year, I've focused on colouring books and actually have published 7 books since mid-January. So 2 of those have only just been published in the last few days, but out of the first 5 books published, 4 out of 5 of those have made sales, and 1 is making consistent daily organic sales at this point. But all of those 4 are still making sales now. I set up auto campaigns for all of those new books, and A+ content is added to all of those as well. And I've switched to only running auto campaigns to new books at the moment because that's just what's worked best for me. Overall, the results have been really positive, but now I'm returning to low content books for the next few books because I'm building an email list to an older pen name at the moment that's long overdue, and I want to continue building on that brand. Okay, so now I am going to go into my royalties for February initially, since that's the month that we've just passed, and then I'll talk about January as well. So this February I made $6,450 in royalties, and that's before ads and expenses, with a couple of high days towards the start of the month, with the highest being $642. And by contrast, the previous February, I made $8,347. So that is close to $2,000 difference. And I will get into a bit more depth with the comparison in a second, just to shed some light on why this might be the case or some of the reasons why. So in January, I made $6,007 and made $432 on the highest day, but it was quite up and down with the lowest day, aside from January the 1st, which is always next to zero. That was $117. I think that was January the 6th. And this is in comparison to $9,042 the previous year. And even the year before that, I'm pretty sure was over $9,000. So for me, a majority of my income does come from the top 20 books that I have published, and even more so the top 10. So if some of those books drop in sales or drop in rankings, then it doesn't take very much to drastically change my income. Don't get me wrong, I'm still very grateful to be able to make $6,000 on KDP in a month. And this is the reality of relying on a platform that you don't have total control over. You don't have control over. So you have control over visibility to some extent through advertising or other means outside of Amazon, but there are lots of things you don't control, and things are going to happen that will change. So you just have to adapt and go with those changes. As I've mentioned in a previous video that I'll link here, Amazon added VAT to the UK and European listing prices, which took the overall listing price way up 20% in the UK. So I had to change my pricing so that the front customer facing price was more competitive. But I only changed those prices in the UK. So when I look at it, there has been a decrease across the US and in the UK. So this is under the UK. This January versus last January was 44% down in terms of net profit. Spending was 87% up on the previous year as well. And then we can go to the US. We can see that still in the US, the overall net royalties were down 51%, but the spending was down 8%. So I actually spent less in January this year than I had previously, and yet a lot more on ads in the UK. So obviously I needed to spend a lot more on ads in the UK to get those results versus the US, but still overall the net royalties were down considerably on the previous year. So it's not just about the VAT increase. Just have a look at February. So this is the US in February, so the change was 0. It seems like I spent almost an identical amount this year versus last year, which is really interesting. I mean, 461 literally to $461, which is kind of bizarre. But the overall net royalties were down 26%. Nowhere near as bad for February as it was in January. And there may be various reasons for that. Obviously, a lot of things went on in January in the US that are going to impact people's behavior. So that may be another reason why it was less. And you can't rely on any month being the same anyway when it comes to KDP. Let's just have a look at the UK. So February, it was down 34% in the UK, so more than in the US. And in addition to that, spending was up 138% in the UK. So versus $300 last year, I spent over $800 this year in February. So there's definitely something obviously going on in the UK, and we know what's happened with that. I've had to change lots of prices, and I think it has significantly impacted my sales. But I do think there's a difference in visibility as well. I think particularly in the UK, which is why I'm spending more on ads. So I think there's been a sort of algorithm change in the UK more so than in the US. And then there's just the regular reasons. You know, there's more competition, more new books coming on there, more books on the platform in general, niches come in and out of fashion, even ones that you could consider evergreen. Certain things are still going to be more popular one year to the next. But when things change, you just have to try and adapt with them. So these were my ads in February, and I spent $1,300. So in the US, the ACOS was 53%, but that was because I was running new ads. And initially, when you're running ads to new books, you're going to have a higher ACOS. Gradually over time, you hope that you're going to get more sales, you're going to rank your book, you're going to get reviews, and then you can gradually reduce it. So even though I was also running ads to new books in the UK, the ACOS was just a lot better because for whatever reason, I was getting many more clicks on those new books in the US. But in January, my ad spend was 1,360. So the ACOS in Canada actually was high in January. And the reason for that is one of the ads that's usually really stable suddenly was not making any sales. So the ACOS went really high on that particular ad. And I didn't notice at first. And the other country ACOS were all fine. That was when the US was creeping up a little bit at 28%. And then that was due to the new books that I published in January. Often people ask me if I have a set budget for book launches, and I really don't. It depends how well the ad is performing as to what choices I make. So as I said recently, I've started auto campaigns for all new books, and that's only once I've published A+ content as well. So as far as the actual bids, I tend to have a look at the suggested bid. If a suggested bid is really high, and sometimes it is, it's a good indication that I'm probably going to struggle to make sales with the ad. But typically I'll say something like 50 cents, and I'll go for half of that. So it'd be like 25 cents, 26 cents, and then I'll just see how it goes. So if there are no impressions and no clicks and no sales, then obviously in a few days I will raise the bid, and I'll keep doing that until I see some sort of results. So if the ACOS is running really high, but some sales are coming in, then I'll continue to let it run for a while just to generate some more sales, and then I will gradually start to try and decrease the bids. So just because your book has a high ACOS initially, don't be tempted to switch off the ad if you are generating some sales. What you're trying to do is rank your book and gain visibility on Amazon so that hopefully you can get some organic sales as well. And then also those initial sales that are coming in are likely, hopefully, going to get you some reviews as well. Anyway, once you are gradually making sales and you want to reduce your ad spend, then you can tweak your bids and reduce them down and reduce your ACOS over time. So let me know how much is going for you so far and what you're up to at the moment. Have you noticed any difference, positive or negative, when it comes to royalties, or are your sales pretty consistent? Let me know. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your week. I will speak to you again very soon.